Two babies, same mother, different colors. She ran that day and vanished for 25 years. But this morning, in a crowded elevator, they stood right beside her. Same eyes, same laugh. No idea who she was. Comment where you're listening from. Enjoy the story. The sterile hospital lights buzzed overhead as Tina Lambourne gripped the bed rails, her knuckles white with pain and confusion. At 22, she had imagined many scenarios for her first childbirth, but nothing could have prepared her for what was happening now. "Push, Tina. I can see the first baby's head," Dr. Christ encouraged, his voice steady despite the unusual circumstances unfolding before him. Tina's world had already been turned upside down 6 months earlier, when her boyfriend Josh had walked out, unable to handle the responsibility of impending fatherhood. Now, as she labored alone except for the medical staff, she wondered how life could become even more complicated. The first baby emerged with a healthy cry, and Tina felt a moment of pure joy until she saw the nurse's expression change. The woman's face went pale as she looked down at the newborn. "Doctor," the nurse whispered, her voice barely audible. Dr. Christ's eyes widened as he examined the baby girl. She was beautiful, with delicate features and skin as dark as mahogany. Tina, with her fair complexion and blonde hair, stared in shock. "That's impossible," she breathed, her mind racing through memories of the past 9 months. But there was no time to process this revelation. The second baby was coming. Minutes later, another healthy cry filled the delivery room. This time, the baby girl looked exactly as Tina had expected. Fair-skinned with wisps of light hair, a mirror image of her mother. Doctor, or Christ had delivered thousands of babies in his 30-year career, but he had never witnessed anything like this. Twin daughters born minutes apart to the same mother, yet they appeared to be from different fathers entirely. "How is this possible?" Tina asked, tears streaming down her face as she looked at her two beautiful daughters. "It's called heteropaternal superfecundation," Dr. Christ explained gently. "It's extremely rare, but it can happen when a woman releases multiple eggs and has relations with different partners within a short time frame." Tina's heart sank as the full weight of the situation hit her. She remembered the night 3 weeks after Josh had left her, the night she had met Alexander at her friend's party. She had been heartbroken, lonely, and seeking comfort. It was meant to be a one-time mistake, a moment of weakness she had immediately regretted. Now, holding her daughters, she realized that moment had changed everything. Over the next 2 days, as Tina tried to bond with her babies, the weight of her reality became crushing. She was a single mother, with no support system, no money, and now 2 children who would grow up knowing they had different fathers. Josh had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with parenthood, and Alexander. She barely knew Alexander. The social worker, Mrs. King, visited on the 3rd day, her kind eyes filled with concern as she sat beside Tina's bed. "I understand this is overwhelming, dear," she said softly. "Have you considered all your options?" Tina looked down at her daughters sleeping peacefully in the hospital bassinet. Stephanie, the fair-skinned baby, slept curled up next to Kay, whose dark skin contrasted beautifully against the white hospital blankets. They were perfect, innocent, and deserved so much more than what Tina felt she could give them. "I can't do this," Tina whispered, her voice breaking. "Look at me. I'm 22, broke, and alone. And how do I explain to them why they look so different? How do I tell them about their fathers?" Mrs. King nodded understandingly. "There are wonderful families waiting to adopt, Tina. People who have been hoping for years to have children." That night, Tina made the most difficult decision of her life. She signed the adoption papers for both girls, her tears staining the documents as she wrote their names one last time. Stephanie Tina Lambourne and Kay Tina Lambourne. The adoptive families were carefully chosen. Stephanie went to the Cleavers, a wealthy couple in the suburbs who had struggled with infertility for years. Kay was placed with the Schumers, a loving middle-class family who had specifically requested to adopt a child of color. As Tina left the hospital empty-handed, She made herself a promise. She would never speak of this to anyone. The pain was too great, the shame too overwhelming. She moved across the country, changed her name to Tina Collins, and built a new life, always carrying the secret of her twin daughters. 25 years passed. Tina had become a successful marketing executive, married a kind man named Emmanuel, and had a son, Darren. She had built walls around the memories of those 3 days in the hospital, convincing herself that her daughters were better off without her. But secrets have a way of surfacing when you least expect them. On a Tuesday morning in downtown Chicago, Tina stepped into the crowded elevator of the Willis Tower, heading to an important client meeting. As the doors closed, she found herself standing next to two young women who were engaged in animated conversation. "I still can't believe we found each other through that DNA test," one of them was saying. Tina's heart stopped. The voice was familiar in a way that made her soul ache. She glanced sideways and froze. The woman speaking had fair skin and blonde hair, with eyes that were unmistakably Tina's own. Next to her stood another young woman with beautiful dark skin and the exact same eyes, the same smile, the same laugh that Tina had passed down through her genes. Her twin daughters. Together. Alive. Beautiful. And they had no idea their birth mother was standing 3 feet away from them. As the elevator climbed higher, Tina's carefully constructed world began to crumble. But what she overheard next would change everything she thought she knew about the decision she had made 25 years ago. "Stephanie, I need to tell you something," the dark-skinned woman said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The DNA results showed something else. Something I haven't told you yet." Tina's hands trembled as she pretended to check her phone, straining to hear every word while her heart hammered against her ribs. "What do you mean?" Stephanie asked, concern creeping into her voice. "We have the same birth mother, but—" Kay paused, glancing around the elevator nervously. "But we also have different fathers. The genetic counselor said it's called hetero-something. It means our mom was with 2 different men around the same time." Tina felt the blood drain from her face. They knew. After all these years of carrying the shame alone, her daughters had discovered the truth she had tried so desperately to hide. "That explains so much," Stephanie said softly. "I always wondered why my parents seemed so surprised when I asked about my biological family. They kept saying they didn't know much about the circumstances." The elevator dinged at the 20th floor and several people got off. Tina found herself moving closer to the back corner, desperate to remain invisible while absorbing every word. "My parents were more open about it," Kay continued. "They told me I was adopted as a baby, and that my birth mother was very young and couldn't take care of me. But they never mentioned a twin sister. I think they didn't know." "Do you think she gave us up because she was ashamed?" Stephanie asked, her voice barely audible. "Because of the situation with our fathers?" Tina's eyes filled with tears. The pain in her daughter's voice was unbearable. She wanted to turn around, to tell them the truth, that she had given them up because she loved them, because she wanted them to have better lives than she could provide at 22. But her feet remained frozen to the elevator floor. "I've been thinking about that," Kay said. "I hired a private investigator last month. I hope you don't mind. But I needed to know more." Tina's breath caught in her throat. A private investigator. "What did you find out?" Stephanie asked eagerly. "Her name was Tina Lambourne. She was 22 when we were born. No family support, no money, and our fathers weren't in the picture. According to the hospital records, she stayed with us for 3 days before signing the adoption papers." 3 days, Stephanie repeated softly. "She held us for 3 days. The investigator found something else," Kay continued, pulling out her phone. "I have her current address. She lives here in Chicago now. Her name is Tina Collins. She got married about 15 years ago. She has a son who's 17. Tina's knees nearly buckled. They had found her. Her new life, her family, her carefully guarded secret. It was all about to unravel. "Do you want to meet her?" Stephanie asked hesitantly. "I don't know," Kay admitted. "Part of me is angry. How do you give away 2 babies and then go on to raise another child? But another part of me just wants to understand. I want to know why. The elevator was approaching Tina's floor, the 32nd. She had less than a minute before she would have to step out and potentially reveal herself. I have her work address too, Kay said. She's some kind of marketing executive at Christ & Associates. Their office is actually in this building. Tina's world tilted. They knew where she worked. They were in her building. The carefully constructed walls between her past and present were crumbling faster than she could process. Maybe we should write her a letter first, Stephanie suggested. Give her a chance to process this before we show up at her door. Or maybe we should just forget about it, Kay said, though her tone suggested she didn't really believe that. Some people don't want to be found. Maybe she's happy with her new life and doesn't want reminders of her past. The elevator dinged for the 32nd floor. Tina's floor. She had to make a choice. Reveal herself or walk away and pretend this conversation never happened. As the doors began to open, Tina made her decision. She stepped toward the doors, but just as she was about to exit, she heard Stephanie speak again. Kay, look at this photo the investigator sent. Tina glanced back and saw Kay holding up her phone. On the screen was a recent photo of Tina at a company event, smiling next to her husband Emmanuel and their son Darren. She looks happy, Stephanie said wistfully. Maybe we shouldn't disrupt her life. But look at her son, Kay pointed out. He has your eyes, Stephanie. The same eyes we both have. We're his half-sisters. Tina stepped out of the elevator just as the doors closed, leaving her daughters behind. She stood in the hallway, shaking, as their voices faded away. They were going to the 40th floor, probably for a business meeting, completely unaware that they had just been talking to their birth mother. She stumbled to her office, barely managing to close the door before collapsing into her chair. Her assistant knocked and asked about the client meeting, but Tina couldn't form coherent words. She sent a text saying she was ill and needed to reschedule. For the rest of the day, Tina sat at her desk, replaying every word of the conversation. Her daughters were successful, articulate, beautiful young women. They had found each other. They were asking the right questions and seeking answers with maturity and grace. But they were also hurt. She could hear it in their voices. The pain of wondering why their birth mother had chosen to raise another child after giving them away. The confusion about the circumstances of their conception. The fear that they weren't wanted. That evening, Tina drove home in a daze. Emmanuel and Darren were at a baseball game, giving her time to process everything alone. She sat in her kitchen, staring at the family photos on the refrigerator. Pictures of Darren at various ages, family vacations, holiday celebrations. Hidden behind those photos was something she hadn't looked at in years. With trembling hands, she moved aside the recent pictures and pulled out 2 small, faded photographs, the only pictures she had of Stephanie and Kay as newborns. She had taken them secretly with a disposable camera during those 3 precious days in the hospital. The nurses weren't supposed to allow it, but one kind nurse had understood and looked the other way. Looking at the photos now, Tina could see how much her daughters resembled the young women in the elevator. Stephanie had grown into a beautiful woman, with Tina's fair complexion and delicate features. Kay was stunning, with her father Alexander's skin tone but Tina's eyes and smile. Tina's phone buzzed with a text from Emmanuel. Game's going into extra innings. Don't wait up. Love you. She stared at the message, realizing that she had built her entire adult life on a foundation of secrecy. Emmanuel didn't know about Stephanie and Kay. Darren had no idea he had 2 older sisters. Her colleagues at work had no knowledge of her past. But now that past was actively searching for her, and Tina knew she had to make another impossible choice. As she sat alone in her kitchen, holding the only photos she had of her twin daughters, Tina heard a car door slam in her driveway. Through the window, she saw a taxi pulling away and 2 familiar figures walking toward her front door. Her heart stopped. Stephanie and Kay were standing on her doorstep, and they were about to ring her doorbell. Tina's mind raced as she watched her daughters through the kitchen window. They stood hesitantly on her front porch, Stephanie clutching a manila envelope while Kay checked something on her phone. They were clearly nervous, whispering to each other and glancing at the house number to confirm they had the right address. The doorbell rang, its familiar chime now sounding like an alarm in Tina's ears. She remained frozen in her kitchen, the baby photos still clutched in her hands. Her breath came in short gasps as 25 years of carefully buried emotions threatened to overwhelm her. The doorbell rang again, followed by a gentle knock. "Mrs. Collins?" Stephanie's voice called out, muffled through the door. "We're looking for Tina Collins. We think you might be our birth mother." Tina's legs finally moved, carrying her slowly toward the front door. Her hand hovered over the deadbolt, trembling. Through the peephole, she could see both young women clearly now. Stephanie's blonde hair caught the porch light, while Kay stood slightly behind her, both of them looking anxious but determined. "We don't want to cause any trouble," Kay added, her voice carrying the same gentle tone Tina remembered from the elevator. "We just want to talk. We have some questions and we hoped you might have some answers." Tina closed her eyes, knowing that opening this door would change everything. Her marriage, her son's life, her carefully constructed identity, all of it would be transformed by whatever happened in the next few minutes. But as she listened to her daughter's voices, she realized she couldn't hide anymore. They deserved the truth, even if it destroyed the life she had built. Tina unlocked the door and opened it slowly. The silence that followed was deafening. Stephanie and Kay stared at her with wide eyes, their faces reflecting a mixture of shock, recognition, and something that looked like relief. Tina saw herself in their expressions, the same questioning eyes, the same way they tilted their heads when thinking. "You were in the elevator," Stephanie whispered. "This morning. You were standing right behind us." Tina nodded, unable to speak. Tears began streaming down her cheeks as she looked at her daughters, these beautiful, grown women who carried pieces of her in their faces, their gestures, their voices. "I heard everything," Tina finally managed to say. "I heard you talking about me, about the investigation, about wanting to understand." She paused, wiping her eyes. Would you like to come in?" Stephanie and Kay exchanged glances before stepping into the foyer. The house was warm and welcoming, with family photos lining the hallway and the smell of dinner still lingering in the air. Tina led them to the living room, where they sat awkwardly on the edge of the sofa while she took the chair across from them. "I'm Stephanie," the blonde woman said softly, as if Tina might not know. "And this is Kay." "I know," Tina replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I named you. Stephanie Tina and Kay Tina. I gave you both my middle name because I wanted you to have something of me, even if I couldn't be with you." Kay leaned forward, her eyes glistening. "Why did you give us up? We heard what you said in the hospital records, that you were young and alone. But you had another son later. You raised him. Why not us?" The question Tina had dreaded for 25 years hung in the air between them. She looked down at her hands, gathering the courage to tell the truth she had never spoken aloud. "Because I was terrified," she began. "Not just of being a single mother, but of what your lives would be like. Stephanie, your father, Josh, walked out the moment he found out I was pregnant. He made it clear he wanted nothing to do with being a father. And Kay," Tina's voice broke. "Your father, Alexander, was a mistake. A one-night encounter when I was heartbroken and lonely. I barely knew him." She stood up and walked to the mantel where recent family photos were displayed. "When you were born, and I saw that you had different fathers, I panicked. I imagined you growing up with questions I couldn't answer. I imagined the stares, the whispers, the judgment. I was 22, and I thought I was protecting you from the mess I had made. But you got married later," Stephanie said, not accusingly, but with genuine confusion. "You had Darren. You built a family." Tina turned back to face them. "I met Emmanuel when I was 30. By then I had gone to college, established a career, grown up. I was ready to be a mother then in a way I wasn't at 22. But I never told him about you. I never told anyone. Does your son know about us? Kay asked. No, Tina admitted, the shame evident in her voice. Darren has no idea he has 2 older sisters. My husband doesn't know I had children before we met. I've been living a lie for 25 years. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Tina watched her daughters process this information, seeing hurt and understanding warring in their expressions. We had good lives, Stephanie said finally. My parents, the Cleavers, they loved me completely. They gave me everything: education, opportunities, support. I can't say I had a bad childhood. Same here, Kay agreed. The Schumers were wonderful parents. They were open about my adoption from the beginning, and they made sure I was proud of my heritage. But Stephanie and we always felt like something was missing. We found each other through a DNA testing website 6 months ago, Stephanie explained. When we realized we were twins, it was like finding a piece of ourselves we didn't even know was lost. Tina nodded, understanding flooding her features. I felt that way too, after I gave you up. Like I had lost part of my soul. But I convinced myself it was for the best, that you were better off without me. The investigator found records of our birth fathers too, Kay said carefully. Josh Cleaver lives in California now. He's married with 3 kids. Alexander Schumer, my father, died in a car accident 10 years ago. Tina gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Alexander is dead. You didn't know? Stephanie asked. I never tried to find either of them, Tina confessed. I was too ashamed, too scared. I just disappeared and tried to forget. Kay reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. This was Alexander. The investigator found it in some old newspaper clippings. He was a teacher, coached Little League baseball. He never married, never had other children. Tina took the photo with shaking hands. Alexander looked older than she remembered him, but his smile was the same one she saw reflected in Kay's face. He was a good man, she whispered. That night we met, he was kind to me, gentle. I was so broken after Josh left, and Alexander made me feel less alone, even if it was just for one evening. I wish I could have known him, Kay said softly. And Josh? Tina asked. Have you contacted him? Stephanie shook her head. We thought about it, but decided to find you first. You're the connection between us, the one person who knew both our fathers. Before Tina could respond, they heard the sound of car doors slamming in the driveway. Through the window, Tina saw Emmanuel's SUV with him and Darren getting out, apparently home early from the baseball game. Tina's face went white. That's my husband and son, she said, panic creeping into her voice. They don't know about you. I don't know how to explain this. I don't know what to say. Stephanie and Kay looked at each other, then back at Tina. They could see the terror in her eyes, the same fear that had driven her to give them up 25 years ago. Maybe we should go, Kay said, standing up. We don't want to cause problems in your family. No, Tina said firmly, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. I've been running from the truth for 25 years. It's time to stop. The front door opened, and Emmanuel's voice called out cheerfully, Tina, we're home. The game ended early because of rain. You'll never guess what Darren did in the parking lot. He caught a foul ball. Darren's excited voice joined his father's as they entered the house, but their conversation stopped abruptly when they reached the living room and saw Tina standing with 2 unfamiliar young women. Oh, Emmanuel said, looking confused. I'm sorry. I didn't realize we had company. Tina looked at her husband, then at her son, then at her daughters. The moment of truth had arrived, and there was no turning back. Emmanuel, Darren, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you years ago. But before she could continue, Darren stepped forward, staring intently at Stephanie and Kay. His 17-year-old face showed confusion and recognition at the same time. Mom, he said slowly, why do these women have the same eyes as us? The living room fell into a heavy silence, Emmanuel looked back and forth between Tina and the two young women, his confusion deepening as he began to notice the unmistakable family resemblance Darren had spotted immediately. Stephanie and Kay stood frozen, unsure whether to stay or flee, while Tina felt the weight of 25 years of secrets pressing down on her chest. "Tina?" Emmanuel's voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it that Tina had never heard before. "What's going on?" Darren, with the brutal honesty that only teenagers possess, continued staring at the women. "They look like family," he said, his voice growing more certain. Really look like family. "Mom, who are they?" Tina closed her eyes for a moment, drawing on every ounce of courage she had left. When she opened them, she looked directly at her husband. "Emmanuel, these are my daughters, Stephanie and Kay. They're 25 years old, and I gave them up for adoption when they were born." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Emmanuel's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, shock, hurt, and something that looked like betrayal. He sank slowly into the nearest chair, never taking his eyes off Tina. "Daughters," he repeated, as if testing the word. "You had daughters, before we met." "Yes," Tina whispered. "2 daughters, twins." Emmanuel's voice was getting stronger, but not in a good way. "And in 15 years of marriage, you never thought to mention this?" Darren looked between his parents, the excitement of catching a foul ball completely forgotten. "Wait, so these are my sisters? I have sisters?" Stephanie stepped forward carefully. "We're sorry," she said to Emmanuel. "We didn't mean to cause problems. We were just looking for answers about our adoption." "Don't apologize," Emmanuel said, though his tone wasn't unkind. "This isn't your fault." He turned back to Tina. "But you? How could you keep something like this from me? From us?" Tina felt her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. "I was ashamed," she admitted. "I was 22, alone, and I made a decision that haunted me every day since. I thought if I never talked about it, if I just moved forward, I could somehow make it okay." "But it wasn't okay, was it?" Kay said softly. "You carried this guilt for 25 years, and we grew up wondering why our birth mother didn't want us." "I did want you." Tina's voice cracked. "That was the problem. I wanted you so much, but I didn't know how to be what you needed. I was broke, alone, and your fathers—" She glanced at Emmanuel apologetically. "Your fathers weren't in the picture." Emmanuel ran his hands through his hair, a gesture Tina recognized as his way of processing overwhelming information. "Fathers, plural. They're twins, but they have different fathers," Tina explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's called heteropaternal superfecundation. It's rare, but it happens." Darren, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "So that's why you always get weird when people ask if you want more kids. And why you never wanted to talk about your life before you met Dad." Tina looked at her son, surprised by his insight. "You noticed that?" "I'm 17, Mom, not 7. I notice things." Darren walked over to Stephanie and Kay, studying their faces with the fascination of someone discovering new family members. "This is actually pretty cool. I always wanted siblings." "Darren," Emmanuel said sharply, "this is serious." "I know it's serious, Dad. But they're here now, aren't they? They're my sisters." Darren turned to Stephanie and Kay. "What are you guys like? What do you do for work? Do you have kids? Are you married?" Stephanie smiled, despite the tension in the room. "I'm a graphic designer, and I'm engaged. Kay's a nurse, and she just bought her first house." "A nurse," Tina said, her voice filled with pride she couldn't hide. "That's wonderful. You help people." "I do," Kay replied, her expression softening slightly. "I work in pediatrics. I've always been drawn to helping children, especially those from difficult family situations." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Emmanuel stood up abruptly. "I need some air," he said, heading toward the door. This is a lot to process." "Emmanuel, please." Tina called after him, but he was already outside, the door closing firmly behind him. The remaining 4 people stood in awkward silence until Darren, with the resilience of youth, decided to take charge. "Well, this is weird, but not in a bad way. Do you guys want something to drink? Mom makes really good coffee." "Darren," Tina said gently, "maybe we should wait until your father comes back. Dad's going to need time to think. You know how he is." Darren gestured toward the kitchen. "Come on. I want to know more about my sisters." As they moved to the kitchen, Stephanie hung back and touched Tina's arm. "We really are sorry about causing problems in your marriage." "You didn't cause this," Tina replied. "I did, 25 years ago when I decided to keep you a secret instead of dealing with my past." In the kitchen, Darren peppered his newfound sisters with questions while Tina made coffee with shaking hands. She watched her son interact with Stephanie and Kay, amazed by how quickly he accepted them, how naturally they seemed to connect, despite having just met. "Do you guys look like your adoptive parents at all?" Darren asked. "Not really," Stephanie laughed. "My parents are both short and dark-haired. I always stood out in family photos." "Same here," Kay added. "My parents are wonderful, but no one would ever mistake us for biological family." "But you look like Mom," Darren observed. "Especially the eyes. And Stephanie, you have the same smile." Tina felt tears welling up again as she listened to her children talk. This was what she had robbed them of, the chance to grow up together, to know each other, to share that special bond that siblings have. "Darren," she said carefully, "you should know that your father and I are going to need time to work through this. Our marriage is going to be complicated for a while." "Are you getting divorced?" Darren asked, his teenage bravado faltering slightly. "I don't know," Tina answered honestly. "I hope not, but I understand if your father feels like he can't trust me anymore." Kay set down her coffee cup. "Maybe we should go. We've already disrupted enough." "No," Darren said firmly. "You just found each other again. Don't let our family drama mess that up." Stephanie looked at her brother. The word felt strange but right in her mind, with admiration. "You're pretty wise for 17. "I get that from Mom," Darren said, then looked at Tina. "At least I thought I did. Now I'm wondering what else I don't know about you." Before Tina could answer, the front door opened and Emmanuel returned. His hair was disheveled from the wind, and his face was red from the cold, but he looked calmer. "I've been thinking," he said, looking directly at Tina. "We need to talk, privately." He glanced at Stephanie and Kay. "But first, I owe you an apology. This situation isn't your fault, and I shouldn't have made you feel unwelcome." "Thank you," Stephanie said softly. Emmanuel continued. "You're Tina's daughters, which makes you part of Darren's family, whether I understand the circumstances or not. And Darren's right, you deserve to know each other." Tina felt a flicker of hope. "Emmanuel, But," he held up his hand. "We have a lot to work through, Tina. A lot of trust to rebuild. This changes everything." Darren looked between his parents, sensing the fragility of the moment. "What if we all had dinner together tomorrow night? Like a family dinner?" "I don't think that's a good idea right now," Emmanuel said carefully. "Actually," Kay interjected, "we were planning to leave town tomorrow. We both took vacation days to come here, but we have to get back to our jobs." Tina's heart sank. She had just found her daughters again, and now they were leaving. "But," Stephanie added, "we could stay one more day, if you want us to." "Yes," Tina said quickly. "Please. I know I have no right to ask, but please stay. We have 25 years to catch up on." Emmanuel looked at his wife, seeing the desperate hope in her eyes. Despite his hurt and confusion, he couldn't deny that she needed this. "One more day," he agreed. "But we're taking this slow. All of us." As the evening progressed, they talked carefully around the big issues, sharing basic information about their lives. Stephanie and Kay learned about Darren's love of baseball and his plans for college. Darren discovered that Stephanie had always been artistic, like Tina, and that Kay had inherited Tina's stubbornness along with her compassion. But beneath the surface conversations, bigger questions loomed. What would happen to Tina's marriage? How would this change Darren's relationship with his parents? And most importantly, could a family fractured by secrets and time ever truly heal? As Stephanie and Kay prepared to leave for their hotel, Tina walked them to the door. She wanted to hug them, to hold them the way she had been unable to do 25 years ago, but she wasn't sure if she had earned that right yet. "Thank you for staying," she said instead. "Thank you for giving me a chance to explain." "We're glad we found you," Stephanie replied, "even if the circumstances are complicated." Kay nodded. "We'll see you tomorrow?" "Yes," Tina said. "I'll make breakfast. I remember you both loved to eat as babies." After they left, Tina turned to find Emmanuel standing in the hallway, watching her. "You love them," he said simply. "I never stopped loving them," Tina replied. "But I was too much of a coward to admit it, even to myself." Emmanuel nodded slowly. "We have a lot to figure out, Tina. I don't know if I can get past the fact that you lied to me for our entire marriage." "I know," Tina whispered. "But watching you with them tonight, I can see how much this means to you. And Darren's right. They're his sisters. That matters." As they headed upstairs, Tina allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, her family could survive the truth. But she knew the hardest conversations were still ahead of them. What she didn't know was that Stephanie and Kay had made a decision of their own, one that would change everything once again. The next morning, Tina woke before dawn, unable to sleep. She had spent the night replaying every moment of the previous evening, analyzing every word, every expression on her daughter's faces. Emmanuel had barely spoken to her as they got ready for bed, and the tension between them was palpable. She found herself in the kitchen at 5:30 a.m., preparing what she hoped would be a perfect breakfast for Stephanie and Kay. She made pancakes from scratch, something she hadn't done in years, along with fresh fruit, bacon, and coffee. She wanted everything to be perfect, as if the right meal could somehow make up for 25 years of absence. Emmanuel came downstairs at 7, already dressed for work despite it being Saturday. "You're going to the office?" Tina asked, though she already knew the answer. "I need some space to think," he replied, not meeting her eyes. "This is all... It's a lot, Tina. I need time to process what this means for us." "I understand," Tina said quietly. "But Emmanuel, I want you to know that I never meant to hurt you. I was trying to protect... Protect who?" Emmanuel's voice was sharper than she'd ever heard it. "Me? Or yourself? Because keeping this secret for 15 years wasn't about protecting anyone. It was about avoiding the consequences of your past." Tina flinched at the truth in his words. "You're right. I was selfish. I was scared that if you knew about them, you'd look at me differently, that you'd judge me for the decisions I made. The decisions you made aren't what hurt me, Tina. It's the lying. It's the fact that you let me fall in love with someone who was hiding half of who she really was." Emmanuel grabbed his keys from the counter. "I don't know if we can come back from this." After he left, Tina sat alone in her kitchen, surrounded by enough breakfast food for 6 people, wondering if she had destroyed her marriage to reclaim her daughters. Darren wandered down around 8, still in his pajamas. "Dad left early," he observed, grabbing a piece of bacon. "He needed some time to think." "Are you okay, Mom?" Tina looked at her son, her youngest child, she reminded herself, and saw genuine concern in his eyes. "I don't know, sweetheart. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm not sure I can fix them all." "The mistake was not telling us about Stephanie and Kay," Darren said with teenage directness. "But having them wasn't a mistake, right?" "No," Tina said firmly. "Having them was never a mistake. Giving them up felt like the right thing to do at the time. But losing them broke my heart." Darren nodded thoughtfully. "Then maybe this is your chance to fix the thing that really mattered." At 9 o'clock, Tina's phone rang. She expected it to be Stephanie or Kay, calling about breakfast plans, but the caller ID showed an unknown number. "Mrs. Collins?" This is Dr. Patricia Cleaver. Tina's blood ran cold. Cleaver, Stephanie's adoptive mother. I hope you don't mind me calling. Stephanie gave me your number. She told me about your meeting yesterday. Dr. Cleaver, Please call me Patricia. And before you say anything, I want you to know that Alexander and I have been hoping for this day for years. Tina was stunned. You have? Mrs. Collins, Tina, Stephanie has always known she was adopted, and she's always wondered about you. We encouraged her to search when she turned 18, but she wasn't ready then. When she finally started looking and found Kay, we were thrilled for her. You weren't angry that she was looking for me? Patricia's laugh was warm and genuine. Angry? Oh, my dear, quite the opposite. Stephanie is our daughter in every way that matters, but she's also your daughter. We've never tried to erase that. In fact, we'd very much like to meet you. You would? Alexander and I are flying to Chicago this afternoon. Stephanie called us last night and told us everything. We were wondering if you might like to have dinner with us tonight. All of us. You, your family, Stephanie, Kay, and Kay's parents are driving up from Indianapolis as well. Tina felt overwhelmed. Kay's parents are coming too. The Schumers are lovely people. We've actually stayed in touch over the years, exchanging photos and updates about the girls. When they learned that the twins had found each other, and now you, they wanted to be part of this reunion. I don't understand, Tina said, sinking into a chair. You're not angry with me for giving them up? You don't think I abandoned them? Tina, Patricia said gently, you gave us the greatest gift of our lives. Stephanie has brought us more joy than we ever imagined possible. And from what the investigators' report showed, you were in an impossible situation. You made a loving decision under terrible circumstances. Tears streamed down Tina's face. I've spent 25 years thinking you must hate me, thinking Stephanie and Kay must hate me. The only regret we have is that you've spent all these years carrying that guilt alone. Tonight, if you're willing, we'd like to change that. After Patricia hung up, Tina called Stephanie's cell phone. We need to talk, Stephanie said immediately upon answering. Kay and I made some phone calls last night. Your mother just called me. Both your mothers are coming, along with my dad and Kay's dad. We realized something last night after we left your house. We've been so focused on finding you and getting answers that we forgot about the people who raised us. They deserve to be part of this too. Stephanie, I don't know if I can face them. I don't know what to say to the people who took care of my children when I couldn't. You say thank you, Stephanie replied simply. And you let them say thank you back. Meow, what do you mean? Tina. Can I call you Tina? You gave them children. You gave them us. Do you have any idea how many couples struggle with infertility? How many people pray for what you gave them? Tina had never thought of it that way. In her mind, she had failed as a mother and handed off her responsibilities to others. She had never considered that her daughter's adoptive parents might be grateful to her. There's something else, Stephanie continued. Kay and I talked about Josh, my biological father. We think you should contact him. Stephanie, no. He made it clear he didn't want to be involved. That was 25 years ago. People change. And besides, he has a right to know that his daughter turned out okay, that she had a good life. What if he doesn't want to know? Then at least you'll have tried. But what if he does? What if he spent the last 25 years wondering about me the same way you have? Tina considered this as she hung up. The idea of contacting Josh terrified her, but Stephanie was right. He deserved to know that his daughter had grown into a successful, beautiful woman. That afternoon, Tina spent 2 hours getting ready for dinner. She changed clothes 3 times, redid her makeup twice, and generally behaved like she was preparing for the most important job interview of her life. Darren found her in her bedroom, staring at herself in the mirror. You look fine, Mom. Great, actually. I'm about to meet the people who raised my daughters, Darren. The people who did the job I was too scared to do. And they're about to meet the woman who gave them their children. I think you're even. At 5 o'clock, Tina's phone buzzed with a text from Emmanuel. Heard about dinner tonight from Darren. I'll be there. We're still not okay, but this is bigger than just us. Tina felt a surge of relief. Whatever happened between her and Emmanuel, at least he would be there to support her through this evening. The restaurant Stephanie had chosen was elegant but comfortable, with a private dining room that could accommodate their large group. When Tina arrived with Darren and Emmanuel, she saw Stephanie and Kay waiting near the hostess station with 4 older adults who could only be their adoptive parents. Patricia Cleaver stepped forward first, a tall, elegant woman with graying hair and kind eyes. "Tina, I'm Patricia. Thank you so much for coming." Before Tina could respond, Patricia pulled her into a warm hug. "Thank you," she whispered in Tina's ear. "Thank you for giving us Stephanie." Alexander Cleaver was equally warm, as were Kay's parents, Fred and Monica Schumer. As they were seated around the large table, Tina found herself surrounded by people who had every reason to resent her, but instead seemed genuinely happy to meet her. "We have something for you," Monica Schumer said, pulling out a thick photo album. 25 years of pictures of Kay. Patricia and Alexander have one for Stephanie, too. Tina opened the album with trembling hands. The first photo was of tiny Kay in a hospital bassinet, just days after Tina had given her up. As she turned the pages, she watched her daughter grow up. First steps, first day of school, graduations, birthdays, holidays. "She was a happy child," Fred said gently. "Always smiling, always helping others. You would have been proud." "I am proud," Tina whispered, touching a photo of Kay in her nursing school graduation gown. As the evening progressed, Tina learned about her daughter's childhoods, their accomplishments, their dreams. She heard stories of Stephanie's first art show and Kay's decision to become a nurse after volunteering at a children's hospital. But the most surprising moment came when Patricia Cleaver asked a question that changed everything. "Tina, have you ever considered that maybe this timing isn't coincidental? That maybe Stephanie and Kay were meant to find you now, when you're strong enough to handle it, and when your son is old enough to understand?" Tina looked around the table at this unexpected family that had formed around her secret. Emmanuel was talking quietly with Alexander Cleaver about work. Darren was showing Fred Schumer photos from his baseball games on his phone. Stephanie and Kay were sitting on either side of her, finally looking relaxed and happy. "I never thought of it that way," Tina admitted. 25 years ago, you were a scared young woman making an impossible choice," Monica added. "Today, you're a successful professional with a stable marriage and a nearly grown son. Maybe the timing is perfect after all." As dinner wound down, Kay stood up and raised her water glass. "I'd like to make a toast," she said. "To all the parents at this table, the ones who gave life, and the ones who gave love, and to family in all its complicated, beautiful forms." Everyone raised their glasses, but before they could drink, the restaurant's hostess approached their table. "Excuse me, but there's a gentleman at the front desk asking for the Collins party. He says his name is Josh Cleaver, and he's looking for his daughter, Stephanie." The dining room fell silent. Stephanie's face went pale as she processed what the hostess had said. Tina felt her heart stop, then begin racing as 25 years of carefully buried emotions came flooding back. "Josh," she whispered, the name feeling foreign on her lips after so many years. Stephanie stood up slowly, her hands trembling. "He came. After all these years, he actually came." "How did he know where to find us?" Kay asked. "I called him," Stephanie admitted quietly. "This morning, after I talked to you, Tina. I found his number through the investigator and left him a voicemail. I didn't think he'd actually show up." Patricia Cleaver reached for her daughter's hand. "Do you want to see him?" Stephanie looked around the table at the faces of all her parents, biological and adoptive, and nodded. "Yes, but I want everyone here when I do." Tina felt panic rising in her chest. Josh was here, in the same building, about to see the daughter he had walked away from before she was even born. And he was about to see Tina, the woman whose pregnancy had sent him running 25 years ago. "Tina, you don't have to do this," Emmanuel said quietly, reaching for her hand across the table. Despite their marital problems, He could see how much this was affecting her. "Yes, I do," Tina replied, finding strength she didn't know she possessed. Stephanie deserves to have both her biological parents here, and Josh deserves to see what an amazing woman his daughter became. The hostess returned a few minutes later, with a tall, graying man who looked nervously around the private dining room. Josh had aged, but Tina recognized him immediately. The same kind eyes, the same gentle demeanor that had drawn her to him during that vulnerable time in her life. Josh's gaze swept the table, taking in the group of people before settling on Stephanie. The resemblance was unmistakable. She had his bone structure, his height, his way of tilting her head when thinking. "Stephanie?" he said softly. "Yes," Stephanie replied, standing up. "I'm Stephanie." Josh's eyes filled with tears as he looked at his daughter for the first time since she was born. "You're beautiful. You look just like your mother did at your age." Tina felt her cheeks flush as Josh's gaze finally landed on her. For a moment, they just stared at each other, both remembering that night 25 years ago when two broken people had found temporary comfort in each other's arms. "Hello, Tina," Josh said gently. "Hello, Josh. Thank you for coming." Stephanie gestured to an empty chair. "Would you like to sit down? There's a lot to explain." As Josh took his seat, Tina found herself studying him, trying to reconcile the man in front of her with the memory she had carried for so long. He looked older, obviously, but there was a sadness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I got your message this morning," Josh said to Stephanie. "I've been driving for 8 hours trying to figure out what to say. I never imagined this day would come." "Neither did I," Stephanie replied. "I wasn't even sure you'd want to meet me." Josh's face crumpled slightly. "Want to meet you?" "Stephanie, there hasn't been a day in 25 years that I haven't thought about you, that I haven't wondered what you looked like, what kind of person you'd become, whether you were happy." "Then why didn't you try to find me?" Stephanie asked, her voice gentle but direct. Josh looked down at his hands. "Because I was a coward. Because I convinced myself that you were better off without me. Because I thought—" He paused, glancing at Tina. "Because I thought your mother must hate me for running away, and I figured you would too." "I never hated you," Tina said quietly. "I was hurt, yes. Scared, absolutely. But I never hated you." "You should have," Josh replied. "What I did was inexcusable. I was 24 years old, fresh out of college, and the idea of being a father terrified me. So I ran. I told myself I was too young, too immature, not ready for that kind of responsibility." "And now?" Stephanie asked. Josh smiled sadly. "Now I realize that running away was the most immature thing I could have done. That if I had stayed, if I had tried, maybe things would have been different for all of us." Alexander Cleaver, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "Josh, I want you to know that Stephanie has had a wonderful life. Patricia and I have loved her as our own from the moment we brought her home." "I can see that," Josh replied, looking at Stephanie with obvious pride. "She's confident, articulate, successful. You did everything right." "We all did what we thought was best at the time," Patricia added diplomatically. Josh turned to Kay. "And you must be the twin sister Stephanie mentioned in her message. I have to say, meeting you both like this is overwhelming." Kay smiled warmly. "It's been an overwhelming few days for all of us. But good overwhelming, if that makes sense." "It does," Josh agreed. "Stephanie told me in her message that you're a nurse. That's wonderful. And that you both found each other through DNA testing?" 6 months ago, Stephanie confirmed. "Finding Kay led us to finding Tina. And now here we all are." Josh looked around the table again, taking in the assembled group. "This is incredible. All these parents, all this love surrounding you both. I can't help but think that maybe things worked out the way they were supposed to." "What do you mean?" Tina asked. "Look at this table," Josh said, gesturing around the room. "Stephanie and Kay have 4 parents who love them unconditionally. They have a brother who's clearly thrilled to have sisters. You, Tina, have built a beautiful family. And me, well, I have the chance to finally meet my daughter and tell her how sorry I am for not being there. Are you married? Stephanie asked. Do you have other children? Josh shook his head. I never married. Never had other children. I threw myself into my career instead. I'm a teacher now, actually. High school history. I think maybe I was trying to make up for abandoning my own child by helping other people's children. You didn't abandon me, Stephanie said firmly. You made a decision that led to me having an amazing life with people who were ready to be parents. If you had stayed out of obligation rather than love, would any of us have been happy? Josh stared at his daughter, amazed by her wisdom and grace. You're very generous. I'm realistic, Stephanie corrected. And I'm grateful. Grateful that Tina gave me life. Grateful that the Cleavers gave me love. And grateful that you cared enough to drive 8 hours to meet me today. Tina felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched Stephanie interact with Josh. Her daughter, their daughter, was handling this reunion with such maturity and compassion. There's something I want you both to know, Josh said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small, worn envelope. I wrote Stephanie a letter the day she was born. I never sent it, but I've carried it with me ever since, hoping that maybe someday I'd have the courage to find her and give it to her. He handed the envelope to Stephanie with shaking hands. I wrote it right after Tina called to tell me she was in labor. I was sitting in my car outside the hospital, too scared to come in, but I needed to put my feelings down on paper. Stephanie opened the envelope carefully and unfolded a piece of notebook paper covered in faded ink. She read silently for a moment, then looked up at Josh with tears in her eyes. Would you like me to read it out loud? She asked. Josh nodded, unable to speak. Stephanie cleared her throat and began to read. To my daughter, I don't know your name yet, but I already love you more than I thought possible. I'm not brave enough to come inside and hold you, and I'm not strong enough to be the father you deserve. But I want you to know that leaving you isn't about not wanting you. It's about wanting you to have everything I can't give you. I hope someday you'll understand, and maybe even forgive me. I hope you'll be happy and healthy and surrounded by people who love you the way I wish I could. Love, your father. The entire table was silent, except for the sound of quiet crying. Stephanie folded the letter carefully and looked at Josh. I forgive you, she said simply, and I understand. Josh broke down completely then, 25 years of guilt and regret pouring out of him. Stephanie stood up and, without hesitation, walked around the table and hugged her father for the first time. As Tina watched her daughter comfort the man who had once broken her heart, she felt a sense of closure she hadn't known she needed. The circle was complete. All the parents, all the children, all the love and loss and hope gathered in one room. Emmanuel squeezed her hand under the table. This is beautiful, he whispered. I understand now why you couldn't tell me. How do you explain something this complicated to someone who wasn't there? Can you forgive me? Tina asked quietly. I'm working on it, Emmanuel replied honestly. But watching this tonight, seeing how much love surrounds our family now, yes, I think I can. As the evening wound down, the expanded family made plans to stay in touch. Josh would visit regularly, building a relationship with Stephanie while respecting the Cleavers' role as her parents. The Schumers invited everyone to Kay's housewarming party the following month. And Tina, for the first time in 25 years, felt like she could breathe freely. I have one more surprise, Darren announced, as they prepared to leave. I applied to Northwestern University last month. If I get in, I'll be living here in Chicago next year, close to Stephanie and Kay. Stephanie hugged her younger brother tightly. We have a lot of time to make up for. We have the rest of our lives, Kay added, joining the embrace. As Tina watched her 3 children together for the first time, she realized that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful outcomes. She had given up her daughters to give them better lives, and in doing so, had somehow given herself and her entire family the greatest gift of all, each other. The twins she had thought she'd lost forever had found their way back to her, bringing with them not just forgiveness, but a love that had multiplied, rather than divided across all the families who had been touched by their story. 25 years later, Tina finally understood that love doesn't diminish when it's shared. It grows. She thought she lost them forever, but life had a different plan. Now she holds all three of her children. And finally, nothing is missing. If this touched you, subscribe, and I'll see you in the